So I want to read a passage for you guys before we get started and before I introduce our guest tonight. Romans 10:13 to 15 say this: "For whoever will call on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then will they call on him in whom they have not believed? How will they believe in him whom they have not heard? And how will they hear without a preacher? How will they preach unless they are sent? Just as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news of good things." Tonight we have a special privilege of having somebody else come in, a guest come in and share about his ministry. And his name is Jim Ayres, and he's got a family. They're not here with us tonight, but Jim is a good friend of mine, and I've known him for a long time now. And we're kind of just talking about how he kind of knew me a little bit before I knew him, because his wife is from Sacramento and went to the same church that me and Abijah are from, though she's a few years older. And how long have you been at Grace Church now, Jim? 19 years. He's been at Grace Community Church for 19 years, been serving faithfully in Crossroads for that whole time. And I'm trying to think what I want to share about him. On a serious note, we'll start with a silly note. He came to UCLA way back in the day, and this is just a testimony to God's grace in sanctification and in growing somebody to be more like Christ. When he was in college, at some point he had long hair, right? And it was dyed blue. And he wore that to church one Sunday. And so the story goes that night Jim was not there, but that night during evening service, MacArthur was talking about how college students are just becoming so much like the world, and they're crazy, and like they dye their hair blue and things like that. And I was just telling that to Jack, and Jack knows Jim a little bit just from being around in Crossroads. And Jack goes, "No way, no!" He couldn't believe it. And it's funny because since I've known Jim, he's just been this man of God that I've looked up to and really appreciated, especially when I was a student at UCLA and he was serving there. And so anyway, on a more serious note, though, he is a good friend of mine because he has just spurred me on to love Christ more, and he's had a heart to be a missionary for a long time. And this has been a long time coming for him to finally be sent out. And indeed, how can people hear if no one preaches to them? How will someone preach if they are not sent? And so he's leaving soon, in a few months, couple months really. And I wanted to take an opportunity to invite him down to come and talk to you guys, even just kind of piggybacking off of our retreat a few weeks ago, talking about missions and evangelism. And I thought there was no better way than to have him come, share what he's doing, hopefully get your hearts excited, and that he would be someone we could be praying for in the future. So, Jim, why don't you come on up? And he's got stories about me too, so I don't know if he's going to share any, but thanks, Jim. Can I use this?
You can use that. What is it on? Turn it off.
Turn it off before I take it off?
Oh, turn it on.
Turn it on before I use it.
Yeah.
Ooh. I don't know. Do you normally preach without this?
I normally don't preach with it, but you can use it.
I don't know. What do you guys want me to do? Better? Talk without it? Use it? Can you hear me now? All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Tranway, for that introduction. We were talking beforehand, and I really had no idea what he was going to say, because he could have gone a lot of different directions with that. So yeah, I guess I got to tell a story about Tranway. So the story I'm going to tell, I think this one's safe. So I was at the other school across town before Tranway arrived there. And as part of the ministry there, what we do, we set up a table at the orientation fair, the summer orientation fair. You haven't told this, have you?
No.
Okay.
And so people come through, all the students come through in the summer, and they sign up at the table. Hey, we got Grace on campus. We're in the Bible study on campus. You want to be a part of this? They sign up their names. And then we write letters to all those people. And so we have the guys write to the guys, and the girls write to the girls, and they're handwritten letters so that it's personal, and you tell them about the ministry, and you try and encourage them to come. Well, when you get a name like Tranway on the clipboard, what do you do with that? Is that a guy or a girl? So we had a girl write Tranway a letter. And Tranway shows up at Grace on campus and says, "Hey, where's this girl? I want to meet her." And so I'm pretty sure that's why he came to our Bible study. That's mostly true. The last part was a little exaggerated. No, but yes, we have known Tranway and Abijah for years, and they're dear friends, and you guys are super blessed to have them here at this Bible study. It sounds weird to me. Is it weird to you?
It echoes off the back.
It echoes off the back? That's why it sounds. So should I lose the microphone? Or keep going? You like it? Okay, keep going. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. It is a privilege, and I say that not just because that's what you say when you're a speaker, but this ministry is really, I guess I could stand behind the pulpit here. I was a part of this ministry about 10 years ago, and it was really getting started at that time. I came over from the other school to come be a part of this. I actually went to both ministries at the same time, and I was here for a year. When this ministry there were really 2 guys and about 2 or 3 girls, and then a shepherd and his wife and me. And on a good night, we could hit about 12 students, or 12 people total in the room. And we met over there somewhere. I don't know what building it was. It was kind of a basement-like thing. And it's just been neat to see this ministry grow over the years to what it is now. And this campus is a tough campus. I just know compared to where I come from, there are Christian groups all over the campus. And I forget the number. It's like 40 Christian groups or something like that. And they range in size from this size, maybe a little smaller, to big hundreds of students. And it's just a very spiritually welcoming campus. I don't know what to call it. The climate there is very different than over here. It's much more hostile. I just remember talking to the guys that I was discipling back then and leading a small group with, and they would get persecuted in their classes and get made fun of, and it was just things that we didn't deal with at my school. And I don't know if you can say that the other place around here. The doors are closed, so it might be safe. But I just know it's tough to be a Christian here, and I admire you guys so much and what you go through, and it's just such an encouragement to see this ministry has grown to what it is now. And I try and pray for you guys still on Thursday nights, or actually Thursday mornings. I pray for you because it's Thursday night. But yeah, so it's a real privilege to be here and just to address this group with that background. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. So this is my family. I don't think I've ever been on an orange background before. So hopefully these slides work in terms of making things out. But that's my family there. You know me, I'm Jim. That's my wife, Bethany. We have 3 kids. Caleb is the oldest. He's 6. He's on my knee there. And then Titus is on my shoulder. He's 4. And Mariah is 2. So that's my family, and it's been said we are preparing to head to Malawi to be missionaries. And when I tell people we're going to Malawi, sometimes they say, "Oh, you mean like the Hawaiian island?" That would be incorrect. Let's see if this works here. Can we actually take the computer and just turn it the other way so I can get this thing? Yeah. I want to be able to. There we go. So Malawi is a small country in the southern portion of Africa. So you can see there it's covered by a large body of water. And so maybe you can't. The blue stuff is supposed to be water. It's a lake there. And so here's my trick for you this evening. Is when you see water, I want you to take the W in water and flip that upside down to get an M. Right? See water, think Malawi, and pray for us. You think you can do that, right? It's a sharp group. Do a quiz on that at the end here. See water, think Malawi, and pray for us. Malawi is a very small country. Oh, there we go. We are about 1 1/3, 1/4 the size of California. So I mean, Africa is full of big countries, big continent, but Malawi is very small, just kind of hidden in there. It's also a very poor country. You take the average annual income per person in the United States. Anyone have any idea what that number is? Okay, I'm hearing some numbers. I think you're a little high. $40,000 a year. How about Malawi? Less than $180 a year. So, I mean, my family, that's a single Costco trip for us. Maybe a cell phone. Malawi is a very poor country. Africa is a poor continent. Malawi is one of the poorest of the poor. Kind of give you another version of this. You can't really see that, huh? This is the world at night. So those are the lights of the world. There's our country portions of interest. That's very good. Right, so you see, Southern California, we got lights. In Malawi, they don't. Right? Country's kind of broken up into two dynamics. There's village life and city life. And this really applies to a lot of Africa. In villages, about 80% of the people, most people live here. And they're one-room mud huts that kind of look like that. There's a little nicer version made out of some mud bricks. But there's no water and no electricity, right? You get your water from a pump like this. This is kind of a nice version, nice clean one. You farm for a living. Corn is their staple. It's really maize. It's kind of flavorless corn. And they take it and they grind it up and make this thick kind of mashed potato-like substance out of it. And that's their staple. They supplement with whatever they can find. There are some bugs there. There's some fish who live by the lake. Tobacco is also a big crop, but this is more for export. They don't really smoke it there. They just try and make money off of it. And they carry everything on their bikes. So here's a tobacco crop. And there's some firewood. So that's the villages. Like I say, most of the people live there. Then you've got the cities. And the cities are very much like LA in that you've got South Central, Compton, right? And then you've also got Beverly Hills. And that's all considered LA. And so you've got very poor people and very rich people, extreme ends of the social classes there. And then on top of that, you kind of have a first, third world mix. So you can have cow carts on the street along with big rig trucks, chicken coop on the side of the road there. There's a makeshift taxi. You can do your shopping at the side of the road like this. You just pull up and buy your furniture. And this stuff is really cheap. It just literally falls apart on you as you pick it up. There's a shop kind of in a neighborhood. And then you see things like this, which looks like a strip mall that you'd see here in the States, right? And it looks like a Best Buy. Nice electronics store. It looks like a Best Buy, but it's not, because you walk in there and it's going to be department store prices and 99-cent store quality. So you're going to pay an arm and a leg for this stuff, but it's going to break on you real quick. So their target audience is really Westerners, people who think they need all these things, and then they can make a one-time sale to you, and your stuff breaks and you never go back. And they have, again, shopping centers like this. I mean, that looks like a Target. Toiletries and different things. In a grocery store like that, which again looks like something you'd see in the States, but the people who shop here are going to be the people with money, right? Your average Malawian doesn't shop here, but it's the diplomats and the people in government and the rich folks. You can live in a home like that. It's a little nicer than the village homes, right? It looks a little more finished. Or you can live in a home like that, which again is very comparable to something you'd see here in the States. If you walked inside, there'd be a stove and a refrigerator and a flush toilet, and you'd feel like you're at home. Things would be a little cheaper quality, but it would at least be comparable. The big difference is every day your power goes out, and your water goes out, and for like 11 hours at a time. So it's not totally like living here. Quick history lesson for you. The region was originally inhabited by tribal groups. In the mid-1800s, Livingston went through here. Turn of the century, the British colonized the place. And this is where the graphics start to get cheesy. In the 60s, Malawi declares its independence. That one's for you, Chandler. You guys know he's into cheesy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And in the 90s, they have their multi-party election system. They really moved to their current government. And so, governmentally, it's a young country. But the key here is Livingston in the 1800s. I don't know how much you know about Livingston, but he was kind of a part Indiana Jones explorer type guy, part missionary. And so what he would do is he would come through the area and he would meet some natives and bargain for supplies and stay a night, share the gospel, and then move on. And so because of his influence, there's this cultural Christianity that's there in Malawi. And it shows up in place names like this, right? Miracle Flower Shop. Or Heaven Bound Funeral Parlor. And this one's my favorite. Divine Providence Driving School. I'm not sure, maybe they don't sell insurance there, or they cover their eyes while they're driving. I'm not totally sure how that works out. There's also a large Muslim group. About 15% of the country is Muslim. Mosque. So International Bible Fellowship Church is the church we're going to be a part of out there. And really this is kind of our team and the build up to this. The Beta Box are Grace Church missionaries. They left about 5 years ago to go plant a church in Malawi. They left to go plant a church out there. A couple years later, the Florians joined them. And Brian serves as the pastor of the church, and Matt is the associate pastor. Really went out there to do more administrative stuff, but because of the need, gets pulled into a lot of the teaching. And then Kwacha is a Malawian national who's actually in the United States now studying. He met Brian when Brian was in South Africa. Before Brian was in Malawi, he was in South Africa pastoring church down there. And Kwacha met Brian there. Kwacha is a Malawian who wanted more training, wanted training in the scriptures and how to use them, and wanted to be a pastor. And they don't have a seminary or anything like that in Malawi. And so he had to go down to South Africa to get that training. Met Brian down there, and Brian said, if you want more training, if you come to the Master's Seminary here in the States. And so Kwacha and I are classmates here, and we plan to go back to Malawi and start a seminary out there. So Brian preaching. Here's a shot of a church. So you can see there's a lot of nationals there. And I don't know how well you can see that, but here's another angle. There's a lot of international folks there as well. And this really reflects the makeup of the city, because the city is kind of an international hub. People come there for business, and they're from all over the world, and that's what you see here in the church. And so a lot of these white people that you see are Americans, they're Europeans, they're New Zealanders. There's also white Africans, so some of them are nationals as well, just to confuse you. So that's the church. What are we doing, right? We're going to Malawi, we're going to be missionaries. What are we going to do out there? This is where it really gets cheesy with the graphics. So you are warned. Chandler, you can laugh. So it's often said that the church in Africa is a mile wide and an inch deep. And when they say this mile wide, what they're referring to is that cultural Christianity, where everyone will tell you they're a Christian, but there's no depth to what they believe. In fact, most people don't even know the gospel and don't even really believe in it because they don't know it. Right? It's I haven't been to the South, not really. I mean, I went to Florida for a quick trip, but I hear there's a cultural Christianity in the South, where people grow up knowing the gospel and they all say they believe. But that's not what the cultural Christianity is in Malawi. People just don't even know the gospel. Right? They say they're a Christian because of Livingston, but there's none of this, Jesus died for my sins. That's completely absent in their vocabulary. They don't know that kind of a thing, or that kind of theology. There's kind of two churches out there in Malawi. One of them it's traditional. And when I say traditional, I mean African traditional. So ancestor worship, you have a witch doctor who's a pastor. I mean, anything goes. You just kind of mix and match and roll whatever you want into it. And so there's a church, and there's quote-unquote preaching, but it's complete storytelling with no Bible, and it's, that's the church that has been established in the country. And And the other church is kind of a health, wealth, prosperity gospel that comes in and says, God wants to give you money, God wants to make you well and get rid of your AIDS and that kind of thing. And so in a third world country with all those issues, it's a very popular message, and it's growing like crazy out there. And so these are the churches. That's what's going on out there. And Brian is out there working with a group of guys right now, and he's kind of teaching the basics of how to study the Bible and how to preach. And you talk to these guys, and what they'll say is, what Brian has given us is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because we are opening the Bible and reading it. And we are taking points from the text and understanding what they say, applying them to our lives. We are using them to be the points in our sermons, and we're crafting sermons from the Scripture. What a novel concept. Here we have that all the time, but out there, they just don't have that, and so it's an incredible blessing. We're learning and growing like never before. But it's a curse because there's nowhere in the country that we can get preaching like this. And now that we know what good preaching is, Brian, the only place we can hear this is at your church, and we know we have to move on. We're just here for a season, and then we have to move on and go back to these churches that don't preach the gospel, don't preach the Bible. And so that's the spiritual condition. That's what it's like out there. And so in the midst of this, the Beta Box started this church, International Bible Fellowship Church. And we plan to go out there in January and come help be a part of this church and help strengthen it. And really what's going on is we're trading places with the Beta Box, because they're coming back on furlough in January, actually I think very end of December. And we're going out there, and I'm going to help pastor the church, just kind of fill the pulpit while he's gone for the 6 months that they're gone. And then when they come back, I'm pretty sure they're coming back. They keep changing their date. It's 6 months. They're up to 8 right now. But when they come back, then we will gladly give him back his pastoral duties at the church, and he'll continue preaching and doing that there. And we'll be involved in the church more or less as lay people. And really what we hope to establish and start there is small groups. I know you guys were talking about small groups and small group leader training. That's very big in the ministry where I come from. But at this church out here, they don't have any of that going on. And so we really hope to leverage our experience from the ministry out here and take what we've learned and take it over there and just help implement small groups and really get that started in this church. And then about the time the Beta Box come back, Quacha also returns, and as I mentioned before, we're going to start a seminary. And so we're going to start a seminary out of the church, very similar to the model we have here at Grace Church with the Master's Seminary and Grace Church kind of hand in hand. And I don't know if you guys realize how valuable that is. A lot of you go to church, but the seminary, having the church and the seminary together like that is so advantageous, because in the classroom, you're learning ministry and you're learning to preach. And it's just like if you're taking a science class and you have the lecture, but then when you get in the lab and you actually see how things work, it's not always the way they go in theory. And so to have the church where you can see ministry in action is so advantageous. And in a place like Malawi, where there's very little church being done biblically, right? To have a church that can be a model church, not a perfect church, but just here's an example of how to do things and how to do things biblically. And now you can see it in the classroom and then see it in action in the church. And so we think there's a very strategic to have those together. And then we also think we're in a very strategic place to reach not just Malawi, but a good portion of Africa. I mentioned before that Malawi was poor. And that actually works to our advantage, because I do college ministry in West LA, right? It's a nice place to be. And people graduate from that ministry and they stick around because West LA is a nice place to live. And that's fine if you're doing college ministry. It provides a little stability because you have some older people that stick around. But if you're starting a seminary and you want to spread the gospel, and you want your graduates to go to other places that don't have the gospel and don't have the church, then you don't want them to all cluster together. You want them to spread out, and that's where being poor is helpful, because people that come from other countries don't want to stay in Malawi. They want to go back where they came from because the standard of living is actually higher there. And so the poverty works to our advantage in that way, and we believe it'll naturally spread people out. And just to kind of give you an example of this, there's another one of these seminaries that we have through Grace Church in South Africa. And I was actually there a couple of years ago, 3 years or so now. And we had people in that seminary from a third of the continent. And that, South Africa, if you know anything about South Africa is where all the money is. in Africa. It's kind of the gateway between the Western world and Africa. So everything in South Africa, everything in the United States you can find in South Africa. And everything in Africa you can find in South Africa. And because of the money, because of the fact that it's kind of the gateway to get out of Africa, everybody wants to go there. And so immigration issues are tough, visa issues are tough. And yet with all those restrictions, they still have people from a third of the continent. Now if you can take that same type of thing, same type of training center, move it up a few countries north to where they don't have those barriers of entry. We believe that we're in a place where we can hit a lot more countries. We figure at least a third of the continent, if not more. So we think we're in a strategic place to reach not just Malawi, but a good portion of Africa. So the seminary is our official charter. That's what we're doing out there. There's also a significant group of Chinese people who come to Malawi for business, of all things. When I was in Africa, when I was in Malawi, I went to the church, International Bible Fellowship Church out there, and this was actually my first exposure to this because there was a couple Chinese people at church there. And I was totally blown away. Like, what are Chinese people doing in this church in Africa? And so I went up to them and I greeted them with the best ni hao that I could, which is just hello. And because of that, they shot back with all this Chinese, right? They were super excited. I don't think anyone had spoken any Chinese to them since they'd been there. And they just went off and on and on and on. I was like, whoa, I really don't know Chinese. I was just faking it. And they started to open up to me. And one of them in particular, Jan was his name. And Jan was just telling me all these stories about himself and everything. And he'd come from China to Malawi for business. And he had, being outside of China, he had religious freedoms for the first time. He was able to get a Bible for the first time and read it. He was able to go to church, and he'd become a Christian. And he was trying to sell me on the fact that the Chinese community in Malawi was ripe for evangelism. And he was saying, this guy that he brought to church with him was not a Christian. And he's saying, if we can just start a Bible study there, I promise you people will come. And he really wanted me to help him do this because he didn't feel he knew enough of the Bible to do this. And I'm like, well, I'm just here for a week, just checking this out. But if I come back, then we'd love to do that with you. And so that's one of the things we hope to do is just get involved in reaching the Chinese immigrant community in Malawi. And I'd love to get some of these guys into our seminary because eventually they finish their business and they go back to China. And so here you have an opportunity now to train Chinese nationals for ministry in Malawi, and then they go back to China and can impact their country there. And you're doing it through Africa, of all places. So we're excited about that opportunity, and that's something else we hope to get involved with. And I'll let this one just play through. Another thing we'd like to do is get involved in reaching that Muslim community. We want to win converts and bring them into the church, right? My background is engineering, so I had fun with the PowerPoint. So this honestly is probably more of a long-term goal. Just from everything I know about reaching Muslims, there's persecution involved with that. And it's not going to be like hostile persecution. They're not going to kill you, but you're going to lose your job and your family's going to disown you and that type of a thing. And you need a mature church that can really come alongside your converts and just provide that family to them that they're going to lose. And so this is something we hope to build in the International Bible Fellowship Church, and just get people thinking that way. I'd love to get our seminary students thinking that way and even push them further north, some of our graduates, to the Muslim countries and impact them as well. So that's our ministry and some of the things we hope to do. What I want to do for most of the remainder of our time is just kind of share our story with you and how we got thinking Africa, because we were never planning to go to Africa. I mean, Africa was never on my map until very recently. I mean, I knew the continent, but that was about it. I still can't tell you most of the countries in there. So my story begins at that other campus across town, where my wife and I were students, and we met each other there. We started dating. We started talking about getting married. And this book, Let the Nations Be Glad by John Piper, is very influential on our lives. I see some heads nodding, so you probably read it. In this book, John Piper talks about being a sender, being serious about missions. And then one of the things he brings up there is this concept of a wartime lifestyle, which he actually borrows from Ralph Winters. And what this is in wartime, you live differently than in peacetime. Well, not necessarily today, but like back in World War II they did. Right? You made sacrifices at home for the war. And so if you needed tires for your car, you didn't necessarily change the tires on your car because they needed the rubber for the war. And so you made the sacrifices at home so that the resources were there at the front lines where they needed them. And this carries over into missions because many Christians live like they're in a time of peace. But we're not. We're in a time of war. There's a spiritual war going on. There's a battle to be fought. We need to make sacrifices to free up resources for this battle. And so we want to live below our means, live below our income to free up money to give to missions and world evangelism. And so Bethany and I were talking about this, right? Because this is something we wanted to do in our marriage, was be serious senders. And we talked about what's this wartime lifestyle going to look like in our marriage as we thought through things like, should we get a home? Should we buy a home? Should we rent a home? What kind of home are we going to live in? What kind of vacations are we going to go on? What are we going to, go after in life? And what we found is there was disagreement. It was easy to agree to this wartime lifestyle mentality in theory. But when you got to specifics, it was very difficult, right? What exactly am I going to give up? And we found that we didn't always agree on that, right? There were things she was willing to give up that I didn't want to give up. And the other way around, too. And then, you can always live more below your means. So how far do you push this? How far is low enough? And we were kind of struggling with these types of questions and just realizing that we were a lot more attached to our stuff than we thought we were. And then in the middle of this, she was diagnosed with cancer. And that stops you in your tracks. I like to say we came face to face with the God of our theology. Right? All the time we say things like trials are meant to grow us and mature us. But when you're faced with cancer, is that something you just say when it's convenient, or do you really believe that? To live that day in and day out when you're facing these hardships, do you really trust the Lord is working these things for your good and His glory? And I think the story that illustrates this best is my wife had a recurrence of her cancer. She went in for surgery, went in for radiation treatment. They ran some routine tests, and in the middle of that, they said, well, we are not going to treat you, not going to give you the radiation treatment today because you're pregnant. And you need this radiation treatment. Your health is in danger. So if you're really concerned about your life and putting that first, then you will abort this child and have that radiation treatment. And it was really easy to say we can't do that. We can't take the life of our child. I mean, this was Titus. This was our second born. But it's a whole other thing then to trust the Lord day in and day out for the next 9 months, not knowing if the cancer is growing, not knowing what's spreading. And once you make a few decisions like that, you realize that many of those things we were struggling with before to let go of with this wartime lifestyle really aren't that big of a deal. And I wouldn't have said we were very materialistic before, but we realized that we were a lot more materialistic than we thought we were. And it really just shook us up and started putting our thoughts on eternal matters and what really matters in life and how attached to our stuff are we and letting go of those things. And not that we figured all this out or arrived. I mean, we still struggle with these things, but we just started thinking about things in a lot different way. And in many ways, this cancer just loosened our grip on this world. And so for the next 6 years, as we fought cancer, we just continued to be involved at Grace Church, down at Grace on campus, on that one campus. Just involved in college ministry, doing what we were doing before. Just loved serving and loved being a part of that ministry. We continued to get to know missionaries as they come through our church. In this church, we have like 70-ish missionaries, families that we send out, which is a ton. And somebody's always back on furlough. And so we just get to know the different families that came back on furlough and explore this concept of being senders and what that meant and how we wanted to be a part of that. And then eventually I decided I wanted to go to seminary. If this worked out, I wanted to devote my life to ministry if I could, but I didn't know if that'd work out because of my wife's health. And it was kind of this ironic tension, because the cancer in many ways loosened our grip on this world, finally pushed me over the edge to where I said I wanted to go to seminary. We wanted to go overseas if we could and teach at an overseas seminary, just knowing the need and how great that was. So finally, like I said, I think the cancer just kind of pushed us over the edge where we were ready to do that. But then at the same time, the cancer was a big leash because it kept us from going overseas to do that. And so we just kind of lived in this tension of, well, we don't know if her health is going to clear up and get better or not. And so should I go to seminary? Should I not? Should we, how should we do this? And so what I did is, I was working as an engineer full-time, and I kept my job, continued to work full-time, and enrolled in seminary part-time. And that put us on a real slow track through seminary. This is my 9th year in seminary. But we figured that's okay. We're at a good place, right? We're at a good place for ministry. We're at a good church. We're learning and growing. And this just gives us a lot of time to just spiritually mature and pick up new ministry skills and continue to grow, and gives the Lord time to work and just make it clear where He wants us to go, if He wants us to go overseas. We were ready and wanted to go, but didn't know if an opportunity would present itself. And if not, that's okay. I can continue just to work and be involved in the church on the side and do ministry, and the Lord will make it clear in time. So we continued like this for a while, and we wanted to go to Asia somewhere if we could. My wife is Chinese American, and that just seemed to make the most sense. And so kind of looked at a few opportunities half-heartedly, and none of those really worked out. We explored some of those, and they didn't work out. And then I had a friend who led a trip, one of these STM trips, summer trips, but they're advertising them this Sunday, right? So one of these trips that they advertise on Sunday here, they were going to South Africa to teach at a seminary. And I thought, this is great, right? This is a chance to go overseas and teach at a seminary. This is what I've wanted to do. And I can go do it. And they speak English in South Africa. And so I can actually do something for the 2 weeks that I'm there instead of struggle through translation. My good friend is leading this trip, and I can go hang out with him. And it's a seminary-only trip, so it was all guys. And I'm thinking, it's a chance to go hang out with the guys. And it was great. The only drawback, which was significant, was it was Africa. And it's like, Africa was not on my map. I had no desire to go there. We were going to Asia. And I began to pray about it, and I decided to go and went to South Africa, taught a seminary over there for 2 weeks, and I absolutely loved it. I just couldn't stop thinking about Africa after that. The challenge of getting through to the African mind intrigued me. African mind is very different than the Western mind. If you ask an African, is a car a verb? They'll say yes, because cars move and verbs are action words. It's like, well, yeah, cars move and verbs are action words, but no, a car is a noun. And so they just think differently, and it was a challenge to get through. There wasn't a language barrier, but there's a cultural barrier. And it was a challenge to get through to these guys, and it took some time, but once you did, you knew that they were going to, multiplicative impact, right? They were going to take the gospel to places, knowing a little bit about Africa now, right? To places where the church was a mess, whatever they called the church, right? They were going to go to places that didn't preach the Bible. They were going to go to places that the Azunga, the white person, never goes to. If you go to, I went to Malawi, and we went and visited some of the villages. And the further away from the cities you get, the more remote it gets. And we were pretty close to a city, but we'd go out there, and the legend is kind of, the parents tell their kids, if you disobey, then we're going to feed you to the Azunga, the white person. And so I'd come out to the villages, and I'd see a white person. And so all the kids would want to come up and touch me. But they'd all try and come up behind me. And if I turned and looked at them, they'd all run away. And they were just kind of playing a game, but this was very close to the cities. As you move much further away, they've never seen white people before. And, like I said, the church is a mess, and to know that these guys are going to take the gospel to places like that, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I came back to the United States, and I worked as an engineer for the next 2 years, doing the seminary on the side and the ministry and all that kind of stuff. And I thought about Africa at least once a week for the next 2 years. I mean, sometimes every day. And I just couldn't get out of my head. I never really thought about going, but just kept thinking about it, right? The need, and, and it was like, wow, the need and how versus my engineering job. And it was just a contrast between the two. And so I was thinking about Africa. I was talking about Africa to my wife. And then Brian Biederbach comes along to seminary. And he kind of holds one of these info sessions. I'm sure you do things like this here at USC, right? They have little job fairs, or, hey, we're going to do an accounting night, and the big whatever groups are here to do their presentation. And Brian kind of did that type of a thing with Malawi. And I couldn't make it, but I emailed him and said, look, Brian, I'd like to talk to you, but I can't make it that night. And he didn't respond back till he was in Africa again, and so I was like, okay, I missed that. So then he comes back for Shepherd's Conference and says, hey, you want to do lunch? I said, okay. And so lunch is approaching. I'm going to go have lunch with Brian. And I think, I should probably mention this to my wife. And so we're in the kitchen one night, and I say, hey, Bethany, what do you think about going to Africa to start a seminary? She goes, okay. And I was like, okay, like, you don't need to think about it or pray about it. You're just okay with this? And she's like, yeah, okay. And I was, I was shocked. And what happened, and she'll tell this much better than I will, but she's not here tonight. So the Lord had just been working in her heart to prepare her for this, without her or myself even really realizing it. It started with the cancer. Like I say, it made us let go of this world and realize that many of the things that we had held on to weren't that important. There are a couple books by Dr. Ayres. He's one of the professors at the seminary. One of them is called The Cup and the Glory, that she's been reading. And one of them, The Cup and the Glory, talks about suffering. It kind of talks about suffering in the sense of two options. There's kind of an active suffering and a passive suffering. And the passive suffering is the stuff that happens to you. You don't necessarily go out looking for it. It just happens because you're just living life. And that's the cancer. But the active suffering is the stuff that you choose. You make a decision that you know is going to make life difficult. You might choose to adopt a kid with special needs or something like that, right? You're choosing a life of hardship. And she was realizing, that she'd been plenty of a recipient of the former, but not the latter. The passive stuff she was very familiar with. And she had learned a theology of suffering and learned lessons from dealing with the cancer. But the active, choosing to go to Malawi was hardship. And here was an opportunity now to take the lessons that she had learned from cancer and apply them to a different circumstance. So that was going on in her head. And then the other book she was reading by Dr. Ayres was The Darkness and the Glory. And in this book, he chronicles Jesus' journey from Gethsemane to the cross. Is that right? I'm not even totally sure. Near the end of his life, right? He dies. I think he even spends a few days. Well, I know Jesus spends a few days in the grave, but I think the book covers that portion as well in the resurrection. Something around those time frames. And she was just struck by the fact that this is Jesus Christ, who's God. And he had infinite comfort in heaven, right? Whatever. It was infinitely nicer than earth. And he gave that up to become a man at a time when life wasn't very convenient. And there was a lot of hardship to live back then. And not only did he live a difficult life, but then he died on a cross. And did all that for the sake of saving sinners and reconciling people to him, to God. And put in that perspective, she just realized that, going to Africa is pretty minor. It's a pretty small sacrifice to give up in light of what our Savior has done for us. And so she had all this going on in her head and had kind of been thinking through Africa as I had been talking about it. Because like I said, I came back from Africa and I was talking about it, not thinking about going, but I would talk about it and she would think about it. And she'd kind of thought, well, if the Lord called me to do something like that, first it started like, there's no way I could do that. And then she started thinking about it more and just kind of shifted to, why wouldn't I do something like that? Such that when I came and asked her that question, she goes, okay. So the Lord had been working in her heart to prepare her for this all along. And so I go talk to Brian, and I say, look, I think we're interested in this, but this is Malawi, not South Africa. I didn't talk so much about this, but South Africa is where the money is. Malawi is poor. And so there's not medical care. There isn't such a thing as health insurance in Malawi. I mean, they can handle day-to-day things like malaria, but if you break a leg, you hop on an airplane and you fly to South Africa. And you hope that the one flight a day is coming up soon, right? I mean, you could be sitting in the airport terminal for 24 hours before you get on that plane to go get your leg treated. So, I say to Brian, can I really bring a wife with cancer history to Malawi? Is that going to work? I think I'm interested, but I just don't think this is going to work, right? And Brian says, well, maybe. And he gives me a bunch of doctors to talk to, and I start making phone calls to Africa and saying, hey, if I bring a wife with cancer out here with this and that, how does that work? And doing the homework, and it actually works out. Because of her type of cancer, they follow most of it through blood work. And because of the malaria, they do blood work in Malawi. And so they can follow it all there. There's one test that we have to do once a year. We have to go to South Africa to get that. But that's okay, because that means we can touch base with civilization and do things like go to the dentist and that. And so we have to go to civilization once a year in South Africa. And her cancer is slow growing, which means you have plenty of time to react to it and hop on planes and fly all over and even come back to the States if you need to. So here I am. I'm an engineer doing ministry on the side, going to seminary. And I've been saying I want to go on missions if I can, but never really thought that was going to be an option, right? Because of all this cancer stuff, and it's kind of like this nice thing to talk about, but realistically, I just felt it wasn't going to happen. It's going to be like winning the lottery if we get to go. And every hurdle that I could imagine that was there had fallen, right, as we looked into this, right? My wife's never going to be on board with this. She's been more on board with this than I have. The cancer, there's no way we can get there with the cancer. That works out. And everything else that we looked into, every obstacle, and I could have come up with a million reasons. The support, I'll never raise the support. I don't like doing that type of a thing. I'm not, all these things. And, well, all those hurdles had fallen. And so here I was now really just needing to make a decision. Am I going to do this or not? I just started thinking about it, right? I've got seminary training. I'm almost done with my second degree in seminary. So I've just been accumulating all this theological training. And there's a stewardship issue to that. Because someday I'm going to stand before the Lord and give an account for my life and how I used it. And I've got risks, fears of going to Africa, risks involved with that, reasons that are uncomfortable that I don't want to go. But then I have a stewardship issue on the other hand, right? And I could stand before the Lord and say, look, I did engineering because I was too afraid to go to Africa. Or I didn't want to, put my family in this risk. But I just didn't feel like that was the right answer to give him, right? I have all these things that I'm going to have to account for in my life. And I didn't want to say to the Lord, no, I didn't go for those reasons. I just didn't feel that was the right answer to give. And so I said, yeah, I'm ready to go. And we walked into Kevin Edwards' office, who's the missions pastor of our church, and said, I think I want to go to Malawi. And then he said, well, how about these other countries? I said, no, I think I want to go to Africa. I've been thinking about it for a long time. And he said, oh, well, you need to go visit. I said, no, I really don't have time to visit. Life's pretty busy. I just want to go. And we kind of went back and forth for a while. And eventually he convinced me to go. Anyway, that's what set us on our current course. So that's us. That's our story. That's how we're heading to Africa. What about you? I should have done this earlier, but I forgot. There are these clipboards that are kind of hanging out on the edges here. Right by you, yeah. And there's the prayer cards. So I'm going to pass these around. There are prayer cards in the Ziploc bags. Go ahead and grab one of those. Stick it on your refrigerator or whatever and pray for us. There's also clipboards. Sign up for our mailing list. We send out a newsletter, and we'd love to get you on there and just get you praying for us, give you updates on our lives and what's going on there. Just put your email address down, and we're not going to spam you, but you might consider it spam. We're going to send you updates on us. So we won't sell it. How about that? What about you? How do you fit in? So when I go around talking, I say we're looking for genuine partners. And what I mean by that phrase, oftentimes missionaries will tell you they want partners in ministry. And what they usually mean by that is code word to, look, it costs money. And we're trying to raise support, so please help us out. And there's a piece of that. It costs money. I'm not trying to hide that. But we want genuine partners. And what I mean by that is we don't just want a monthly paycheck. We are looking for people that will really be engaged in this ministry with us to as much of a degree as you'd like to get involved in it. So here's some ideas for you. The first thing I have here is just keep up with us. Right? And I say keep up with us because we have this newsletter. Sign up for that. We try and send monthly updates rather than quarterly. Because if you're getting a letter every 3-4 months from us, you don't really know what's going on with us. And even monthly, you're not going to totally know, but at least we're hoping that's enough that it'll keep you up to date and keep you thinking about us. We're going to try and get on Facebook. I'm really bad at this. Honestly, it probably won't happen until I get to Africa. But we're trying to get on Facebook. My wife's a lot better. You can see pictures of our family and that sort of a thing. We're trying to communicate is the point. We might do some videos and things like that. And we're doing this not because we want to be popular, but because we want you to pray with us. Pray with us for this nation. We want you to be informed so that you can be praying, right? See water, think Malawi, pray for us. If that works, do it. Do the spontaneous prayer thing. If you need to be a little more systematic, do that. You guys have small groups. We do this at the school I come from. In our small groups, we adopt missionaries. And we have missionaries from Grace Church that we adopt, and there's one person in that small group that keeps up with the missionaries a little better. And then when you come to small group and you go around the circle and you share prayer requests, somebody who's keeping up with us shares the prayer requests for us like we're part of that group. And then you spend time praying, then you pray for us like we're part of that group. And we would love it if you could do something like that. I mean, I don't know if I'm overstepping bounds there, but an idea for you, right? Those are some ideas. Take what works for you. You can, we'd love it if you'd pray for us. Another thing I have here is adopt a student or a pastor. And what this is we want to send over profiles of our pastors. We got different students that are enrolling, and they've got different backgrounds and different ministry aspirations and that kind of thing. And so we want to take profiles of these students and send them back, and maybe they can send over monthly updates. And you can just pray these guys through seminary. And if you want to adopt one of these as a small group or even a ministry, as the USC Bible study here, adopt a pastor and just pray them through school. And another idea I've got along these lines is I would love to, this isn't for everyone, but I'd love to get you guys involved in helping them with their English, if I can just say it that way. These guys are going to be doing a Master's of Divinity, a master's level degree. And English is not their first language. And so if I'm grading papers, they're going to be handling theology and language, and that's just going to be a lot for me to deal with. And so what I would love to do is kind of pair people up with those in the States. Maybe they can scan papers and email them over here, and then you guys can mark them up, help them with their language, and send them back, and just kind of help. That way you get the English part taken care of, and all I'm working with them on is the theology and the ministry and that sort of thing. So that's an idea. It's not for everyone, but if you're interested in something like that, right? I mean, this is what I'm talking about when I say genuine partners. It's there for as much as you want to get involved in this ministry. And if you've got other ideas, I'd love to hear them. Come to Malawi on a short-term ministries trip, right? This Sunday, I don't think there's a Malawi trip, but hopefully in a year or two there will be. Come visit us. We'd love to get you out there. I just know these trips have been incredibly impactful on my life, and it'll change your life if you go. And then I have hang out with us, right? Hang out with us when we're in town. Our cancer story scares people away. Often they say, "Oh, I can't respond like you," and it's like, I don't know how we respond. When the Lord drops things in your lap, you learn to respond. We don't always respond rightly, and I really just think we are normal people that are just trying to be faithful to the Lord in whatever circumstances He's put us in. And I'd say that's probably the same of you as well, right? You've got different difficult circumstances, and you're trying to be faithful to the Lord in that. And so we're normal. Don't let this cancer label scare you off, and don't let the missionary label scare you off, right? Because, again, we're not super godly people in that regard. We're very normal sinners that are struggling to live the Christian life just like you. So don't be afraid of us. Come talk to us. I guess it's really me right now, but we're at Crossroads too, so you can see the rest of my family there. That's just the remainder of our time. Are there any questions? What time do we got to end here? Are we done?
No, we're good.
Okay. Do you want to do questions?
Yeah, do you want to come go with them?
Whatever you want to do.
Or I'll go there with you so
Okay.
I can kind of field questions for you.
Do you want this? You want to get rid of it?
You can hang on.
I'm going to hold on to it.
So,
Does anybody have a question?
oh, can someone turn on the light for us? This is dark, but
Is it dark?
Jenny.
What would be some opportunities or tasks that we would do in Malawi if we were?
Yeah, part of this, the question is, what are you going to do if you come to Malawi? I don't totally know. We do need to do, you need to do something, right? We can't just come and hang out. But something is pretty vague. And I think that's okay. I mean, if you got a medical background, doctor, dentist, nursing, that kind of a thing, I would love to have you come over and do some medical ministry type stuff alongside the church or whatever. I'd love to do like a family camp where we can bring in Tranway to come speak. And then all the parents come and they've got kids, and so we need people to watch kids, so you can come over and watch kids during family camp week so the parents can be a part of family camp. Ideas like that, I mean, I don't totally have concrete stuff, but once I get over them and understand better what's going on there, I really want to look for things. And so this worked great at this church because you're all connected to the church, and sometimes when I talk about things, I kind of have to funnel them back to GMI or this type of thing. But you guys all clear that part of it. So email me and just say, hey, what can we do? I want to come. And I might say, hey, what do you do? What's your background? And we'll figure out a way to get you there if you want to come. So I'm serious about that. I really want to get people out there. So I don't know, does that help or figure something out and we can figure it out together? Yeah.
What's the timeline on when you're going to be starting the seminary?
Yeah, the timeline on the seminary. We're leaving in January, and the first 6 months is the church, and really adjusting to an international move, which isn't easy. I'm learning there's a lot that goes into that. And so I don't know how long that's going to take. I really think it's going to take about a year to really get settled and comfortable in the country. But we're going to be doing ministry during that time. I think a lot of the first steps of the seminary are going to be paperwork and registration and standing in line in government offices and that kind of a thing. So that stuff will probably start right away. We won't start the official seminary any earlier than the summer because that's when Brian and Kwacha come back, and they'll very much be a part of that. I didn't talk so much about this, but with seminary, we really want to do 2 programs or 2 schools. And what that is really it's one program geared toward the village people and one program geared towards the city people. The difference being education. Right, the people in the villages don't really have schooling beyond some elementary. They can read at a basic level, and that's about it. The city people will have college degrees. And so the one, we'll call it a Master's of Divinity, the one program will be the city program with people with education. And it's going to be a true Master's of Divinity, just like we offer here at the seminary, a Master's Seminary. We hope. Just like it, right? We're going to, it'll be academic, it'll be the full deal with the Greek and the Hebrew and all that kind of stuff. And the other program will be more of like a certificate level, where you're going to teach us the basics of studying the Bible and preaching and that sort of a thing. And what we'd like to do is take the graduates of the first program and use them to staff the second program. And so in missions, you're always trying to work yourself out of a job. You're always trying to replace yourself with a national. That's how you know you're done, is when there are nationals that can take over your job for you, right? And so with Kwacha, we have such an advantage because we're one half, 1/3. I don't know. It's supposed to be just Kwacha and myself. I'm sure Brian's going to get involved. I can't see him kicking back. So 1/3, 1/2 national from day one with that program. And then that second program, if we do it right, it'll be 100% national from day one. And so we're excited about that. That's kind of the vision and the plan we're trying to go for. We'll start with that Master's of Divinity. Brian's got a group of guys that want that training. They're asking for it. That'll be our first class. So that could start as early as fall of 213, maybe fall of 214 if we're a little slower with the paperwork, which is very realistic. Somewhere in that time frame. Anyone else? Tranway's got some questions.
I did, but you kind of talked through all of them when I was
half
going
of them
through.
are crossed out.
Well, but the other ones I just didn't cross them out, but you kind of answered
Okay.
them. Students are thinking, I heard what you said about the wartime lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like for a college student? What are some ways that you would encourage them to think in that mindset?
Yeah, I think it starts, I would learn. There's a lot of ideas of what missions are out there, and you read it in Romans 10, right? It all starts back with sending, someone being sent. And I think a lot of people just go without being sent. And so you really want to work on sending. We often just think of missionaries as people who go, but somebody's got to send them. And so, is there anyone here who wants to go on missions? Right? Start by getting to know that person and building that relationship with them now, because now you'll have a relationship and you can help affirm them in their giftedness, right? You can say, yeah, this Bible study lesson that you've taught, it's been very encouraging. I think you're totally geared to do that. I think you should talk to Tranway or Austin or somebody and express your interest in missions. You can even, depending on your relationship with that person, you can even start giving them feedback and helping them, it was a great lesson, but I was confused on this, maybe you can explain that a little differently or help me understand that better. And you can really start help sending the people at a very ground level. And that's what's exciting. I think even as we are being sent out and we're trying to do this at the other campus, this is a place I've served for 19 years. And a lot of students have left, but there's a lot of students, these days I'm not as involved, but I've trained their small group leaders and that kind of a thing. And so people know us. And it's not like we're just the picture on the postcard on the side of the sanctuary there at Grace Church, right? I don't know if you walk by there, that's all our missionaries. And they're just people that a lot of you don't know. But you have an opportunity to get to know somebody before they go, and it's your peer going out. And that's just a whole different ballgame. There are a lot of missionaries that come back. Like I say, there are people that are on furlough all the time. We have missionary houses right beside our church. I don't know if you know that they're there. But these are places where the missionaries are allowed to stay on furlough. The church owns them, and they let the missionaries stay there rent-free. And so you can call the outreach office. You call Kevin Edwards. You're not going to get him, but you can call Jen, his secretary. Tranway can give you her number. And just say, who's going to be in the mission house? Or you can just go knock on the doors of the mission house and say, hey, I'm from, whatever. You guys can set up something and say, look, we'd just like to bring our small group over, our Bible study, USC. Everyone wants to come over and just get to know you. Missionaries love to talk because they're over in those other countries and they have all these stories and experiences from that. And they come back to the States, and especially at Grace Church, you're just a number in the crowd. Most people don't know who you are. And you've got all these stories and things to share and tell. And if you get somebody coming over and say, hey, tell me about your ministry, what's going on over there? They'll talk to you forever. They'll probably make you dinner and all that kind of stuff too. So it's food. So just get to know missionaries, get to know people. I would even say give. You don't have a job, and you might not have a lot of money to give, but it's not going to get easy to give later. It'll get easy right when you get out of school because you're going to have an income. But eventually you get married and you have kids and you have mortgage payments and all these things that are hard to find money to give to missions. And if you don't have a habit of giving now, it's not like you're just going to develop that later. It's the same type of principle in terms of a relationship, right? You're struggling with lust. A relationship's not going to cure that. You've got to deal with that issue. It's totally different because that's a sin issue but it's I'm going off the top of my head here. But it's the same type of thing where you've got to learn to deal with things before you get in the situation. Don't get caught up in this, well, someday I'm going to have all this money, it's going to be easy to give. Read books. John Piper's Let the Nations Be Glad. It's a great one. For the Sake of His Name by Duran. It's a good one. Peter's book. It's a little theological. Ralph Winter's article, what's it called? You can just Google wartime lifestyle and Ralph Winters. Queen Mary. He tells this big story about the Queen Mary. Google that. It's a great article. I mean, I can give you books. Tranway can give you books. Email somebody. But those are probably, learn, be informed, so study, develop your missiology is what they call it, theology of missions. Start giving and get to know missionaries.
Any last questions before we finish up? So,
Somebody's got a question.
oh,
Well, how would we give if we want to?
You can go to the Grace Church webpage, and they've got, under outreach, you've got to poke around a little bit, but it's not hard to find. They just have a list of all 70 missionaries. And you can just give right there. You can just pick the ones. They even tell you little paragraphs about them and what they're doing and that type of a thing. So it's, I'm not trying to say give to us, but it's, I mean, those are, all those people are doing great things. And they might even have a country you're more connected with, or you might realize somebody knows somebody who, So there's a lot of connection points with different missionaries that you could find there.
So we'll have some of that information for you guys in the coming weeks. I didn't want to be like, hey, bring some money to give to him now, and you didn't even know him. But after he's done this presentation, I do want to give you guys an opportunity to maybe give to their ministry, and we'll do that in coming couple weeks or so.
I thought that was an earthquake the first time it did that.
Oh yeah, no, the AC goes on and off.
And I should say pray. I mean, that's the most obvious one, but is really just make it a point to pray for missionaries and pray for us. If that's the one thing I can ask you to do, pray for us. Going to Africa is a whole different world. There are witch doctors, spiritual warfare that we've never seen before. Just a whole different element to that. And so we would covet your prayers in that regard.
Let's give Jim a hand and thank him for coming and sharing with us. One of the main reasons why I wanted him to come and share is just because I know that his heart for missions, his heart for Christ, and even just the things that God has brought into his life and his family would be such an encouragement to all of you. And I know sometimes when you're in college, it can be very your life centers around class, your dorm room, and some friends, and that's about it. And some church. You throw that in the mix, and that's all you're thinking about when there's a whole world out there that needs Christ. And I wanted Jim to come in and kind of share that with you and open your eyes and open your heart to see what God's doing around the world. And even now in college, to start developing that heart that Jim was talking about, heart for missions, because that's not going to develop just because out of entropy or something. You've got to develop that even now. And somebody's like, entropy, what's that?
Major.
Yeah, sorry, science guy here. So that, and I hope this was helpful for you guys in that way. Definitely, he'll be around for a little bit, and you can talk to him, and he'll be there on Sundays in Crossroads as well. So let me pray, and